Hello and welcome to this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated with the next tutorials. As you can see, the first thing I did was sit at the pottery wheel and make two very simple bowls. The clay I used is black grog clay, though its color turns black only after firing. Right now, as you can see, it has a dark brown tone. I was quite satisfied with the quality of this clay. Since it contains grog, working with it on the wheel was a bit challenging. However, because the grog particles are very fine, it didn't cause too much trouble. My goal with this piece is to combine hand building and wheel throwing techniques. I want to create a form that appears slightly deformed, as if it was shaped entirely by hand. To make the process easier and faster, I first threw the two base bowls on the wheel. I will be creating a separate playlist where I will teach the basics of wheel throwing. That way, if you're interested, you can learn how to use the pottery wheel to make your work easier. Even if your main focus is hand building, knowing how to incorporate certain elements from wheel throwing can help speed up your process. Now, I will set these two bowls aside to rest for a while. Then, we will see how we can transform them into a beautiful, deformed ceramic piece. Now that the bowls have firmed up slightly and reached the leather-hard stage, it's time to join them together to create our final form. The first step is to carefully cut out the bottom of one of the bowls so that it becomes open. This will be the bowl that sits on top of the other. Next, use a scoring tool or a rib to roughen the surface where the two bowls will be joined, specifically the rims of both bowls. Be thorough with this step to ensure a strong bond. One important detail I forgot to mention earlier. Make sure that both bowls are identical in size and wall thickness. This is crucial for a seamless connection. Now that both rims are scored, I will apply a bit of slip, which is essentially clay glue to the scored areas. Be precise with this step. However, if your clay is still quite fresh, you may not need to add slip, as the moisture in the clay will naturally help them adhere. Gently place the bowl without a base onto the other one, aligning their rims perfectly, just as you see in the video. The next step is to blend and seal the seam where the two bowls meet. To do this, I will once again use my scoring tool to roughen the seam and ensure a strong bond. After that, we will smooth it out completely to make it look seamless. Once the entire joint is fully scored, we move on to the next step, creating a coil. I'm going to use a clay coil to reinforce the connection. I will place the coil directly along the scored seam. This will not only strengthen the bond, but also add some volume and a slight ridge to break the simplicity of the form. This way, I ensure that the seam is fully secured and visually enhanced. After placing the coil along the scored lines, I begin to use a simple wooden rib to gently blend the coil from both the top and bottom. The goal is to pull the coil into the main body of the piece, making it look like the coil has come out of the form naturally, as if it's an integral part of the piece and not a separate element. At this stage, you can intensify this process as much as you like. You could even make the coil smaller and smaller by blending it more, depending on your preference. If you want a more subtle look, you can make the coil thinner or use an even finer coil, ensuring that it seamlessly blends into the surface of the piece, leaving no visible trace of the connection. Once I achieve the level of refinement that I like, it's time to shape the top surface and the rim of the vessel. Since I originally made this piece on the wheel, the bottom part is slightly thicker. If you remember, we previously cut out the base of one bowl so that we could continue working more easily at this stage. Now, I begin refining the rim by applying pressure, mainly with my thumb, while controlling the movement with my index finger from inside the form. By gradually pressing and shaping, I aim to narrow the opening and thin out the thickness of the rim. This will prepare the piece for the next step, where I will continue refining the form using a clay coil. At this stage, you can use a metal rib to make the process smoother and cleaner. Make sure that whenever you're using a metal rib in this way, One hand is placed inside the form to act as a support for the body. This prevents the piece from losing its shape while you refine the surface. Using a rib will give you a much cleaner finish compared to working with just your hands. After that, as you can see in the video, I continue working with a clay coil. Since I want to narrow the opening even more, I place the coils at an angle, as you can see, and gently press them inward toward the body to create a slight connection. The smaller the angle, the more you can close the rim. You can keep repeating this process to tighten the opening as much as you like. I'm also using this method to add a bit of height to the rim because I want it to be slightly taller. Let's see how it turns out. As you can see, I first score the entire surface using a scoring rib. Then I switch to a different angle with the same tool to smooth over those scored areas. The more carefully and thoroughly you do this, the stronger your connections will be, ensuring that your form is secure and free of any trapped air pockets. In my opinion, the scoring rib is one of the most essential tools in pottery. By the way, you can keep this textured surface if you like. This type of scored texture has become quite popular in contemporary ceramics, and many artists intentionally leave it visible. With just a metal scoring rib, you can easily create this effect. However, be mindful of the process. First, score the surface, then smooth it out for secure bonding. After that, once your form is almost complete, you can go back and add intentional scoring marks to create a rough, organic texture. As you can see, I'm applying random, uneven scratches across the surface, but this is entirely up to your preference. I personally like this effect, so I'm adding it all over the piece. Now, at this stage, I want to add a bit of white slip to my form. I'm using a brushing slip. If you apply slip at this stage, after firing, you'll get a really interesting surface texture. It won't be perfectly smooth or glossy since the clay is still unfired, but it's definitely worth trying. It creates a texture somewhat similar to terra sigillata. I'm using a milky white brushing slip. As you can see, I pour some onto my turntable and then use a natural fiber brush. The texture created by the natural bristles gives a really beautiful effect on the surface. I apply the slip using quick tapping motions to ensure it soaks into the brush fibers properly. Then, as you can see, I start gently dabbing the slip onto the surface of my form. I intentionally keep it uneven because I like an organic, textured look. If you're using a brushing slip at this stage, keep in mind that layering is key. The more layers you apply, the brighter and whiter the final result will be after firing.